Explain a little bit to us about your district and why this issue of marijuana really resonates with your constituents.
Well, Oregon was the very first state to decriminalize marijuana. Portland, Oregon is reputed to be a progressive community, but actually this is an issue that appeals to conservatives and liberals alike. People understand that the federal regulation of marijuana is flawed. It's not highly addictive. It does have medicinal uses. And we're part of a wave that's taking place around the country where over 30 states have decided by the voters to be opposed to the failed policy of prohibition of marijuana.
So explain to us a little bit about the economics of it. We talked to Governor Hickenlooper recently, and we talked a bit about that. You said on the House Ways and Means Committee, I believe, would this be potentially a source of tax revenue for the federal government?
Well, absolutely. What we will do sometime in the next 5 years, we will be treating it like alcohol. States will be able to regulate it as they see fit, as is happening now, and they'll be able to establish levels of taxation. But the federal government ultimately will have a national tax, which would be a new source of revenue. I hope it will be dedicated to dealing with people with addiction problems. We have a whole array of things that are underfinanced. This is an opportunity, what we should have done with alcohol revenue to deal with people with alcohol problems, but it will be a not insignificant source of revenue. We're talking about a sector of the economy within 5 to 10 years, which will be as big as the NFL.
So, Congressman, you mentioned federal legislation because people should remember, as some states legalize it, there's still a federal statute that says you can't buy, sell, use marijuana. It's not enforced under President Obama. It really wasn't enforced. Under President Trump, they've indicated maybe they're going to liberalize the enforcement policy a little bit. How high a priority would this be for the Democrats, your Democratic Party, in the new Congress, if, in fact, the Democrats take over the House?
Well, what we're going to see this fall is that this is a controversial issue that has the largest source of public support. It's not like health care. It's not like dealing with war and peace, global warming, but it is very important to a lot of people. And what we're going to see is that in Missouri, it's going to pass. In Utah, it's going to pass over the objection of the Mormon Church. It's going to pass in Michigan, continuing this parade of action at the state level. So it's not the most important issue in the world, but it is very consequential. It deals with an opportunity for us to be able to have significant advancements in health care. I mean, states that have medical marijuana have fewer opioid deaths. And the stories I hear about how medical marijuana has transformed people's lives are very, very compelling. And the voters have responded time after time after time, starting in 1996. So there is a public consensus. The support is growing. You'll see it at the ballot box this year. And it's one of the things that a Democratic Congress could do relatively easy because the table has been set. We have more support even with a Republican-dominated Congress. If their leadership would have allowed us to vote on these proposals, we would be passing a number of them now. But with Democrats in control, we will be able to have the legislative process work, and we'll see more progress in a relatively short order, I think.
So let's talk about that leadership and talk about the Democratic leadership, because you have a leader in Nancy Pelosi who has said on the record, not that she's against liberalization, but it is not her priority. She's got a number of other things that are in line ahead of this. Are you going to be able to persuade her otherwise?
I agree with her in terms of top priorities that she's dealing with. But we have many priorities in Congress, and this is something that can move forward relatively quickly. We have a crisis in this country because as more and more states legalize, the federal interference with banking creates a public safety problem, it's a business problem, and it's insane, forcing these state legal businesses to operate on an all-cash basis. That's not controversial, and it will make a difference right away. I have legislation that would have allowed Veterans Administration to work with veterans in states where medical marijuana is legal. In fact, it passed both the House and the Senate in the last Congress, and the Republican leadership stripped it out. This is ready to go right now. It's not controversial. It's supported by veterans organizations, and it would make a big difference for the health care of American veterans. These things are set up, ready to go. It doesn't have to be the top priority. You just need to let the legislative process work to reflect the priority this has with the American public.
Is this important?
I've been working on this for decades, and we've watched public support grow dramatically, and it's being shown at the ballot box every election.
So given all of that, Congressman, is this an important enough factor for your colleagues, your Democratic colleagues in the House, to take into account with respect to the leadership? You're going to have some leadership changes anyway because Mr. Crowley didn't get past the primaries. There's some people even talking that Nancy Pelosi might be time for her to move over. Is this important enough that it would actually be a factor in people voting for the next leadership team?
Well, the second and third tier issues are not we don't have a stranglehold with Democrats the way the Republicans do. The Republicans have failed to allow us to vote on these things that are popular and supported. They didn't have to make it a top priority. They just didn't have to put the kibosh on it. Democrats going forward on a Judiciary Committee, on a Ways and Means Committee, on the Veterans Committee, there are opportunities for them to do this, and these will be some of the easiest things to do in the first 6 months of a new Congress because they're supported by the public. The legislation is already teed up and ready to go. It's one of these areas of progress that will show that we can get our act together and move forward. It doesn't have to be the top priority. It's simpler than health care or global warming, and it's supported by the public. I think it's a no-brainer. I think it moves in the next 6 months.